morning. If anyone's out there, just feel free to say hello. We're on our beach weather today. Not really. Good morning from, oh, it is sunny there, Michael. Lucky you.
Yeah.
Not sunny here. We're pretending with my umbrella and our beach clothes, but it's actually raining.
Yeah. Hi, Sarah. Holy Michael, you're keen because it's only 7:30 there. Wow,
Morning
that's
person.
impressive. Hi, Arun.
Hi, Arun.
It's like I feel like I know some of these people.
I know.
Hey, Ben from Petawawa.
They're going to recognize our face if they ever see us in person, and we'll be like,
Don't know who you are. Typical morning for you? Oh, okay, well.
I'm a morning person too, Michael. I'm usually up between 5
Hi,
and
Elijah.
5:30.
Yeah, you guys are freaks. I was up because I was stressing about this presentation. Yeah. Rightfully so, apparently, because so many technical glitches.
Yes. Oh. Once again, I took back the power.
Heather has the power. Apparently, I'm not allowed to play by myself. I'm still on training wheels.
I think what you did was you joined the room before you set it up. You can't do that. Did you do that?
Yeah, I'm supposed to click on the name, not to join.
Yeah.
Now I know. Now I know. Hello, Ilana from Halifax.
Hello, Ilana. Elijah, I love that name, Elijah.
Yes, I do require maximum supervision. That's actually true even at work, like when we're in the office. Because I'm like, the paper cutter's not working. Let's just take the safety guard off and see if that helps. Like, no.
Well, so far you haven't done too bad. Nothing, no permanent injuries at least.
Hi, Rainy Fredericton. No permanent injuries. Just to my ego. It's very fragile. Our cruise was canceled.
Oh, that's too bad, Michael.
With the pool? Nice. That sucks, but
yeah, Carissa was just saying that Carissa's Dutch and she was going back to Holland for a visit this year, and so now they're building a climbing wall.
Yep. Instead of trampoline. Yeah, such is life with. It's kind of funny when you think about all the stuff that's happening, and the changes that people have to make and the adjustments, and I think some of them are good adjustments.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of them are good adjustments. It's just wrapping our heads around that. Hi, Melissa. All right, I don't know. What do we got? 8:33. What did we say that we were giving people?
We'll give them 2 more minutes and then we'll
start.
We didn't sign on till right at 8:30, so
yeah,
we were a little bit behind setting up.
Well, when my husband and I, it's just not, don't have to send gifts or anything, but it's my anniversary today. And my husband and I got married in May, obviously, and we built a garage that summer.
Yes, we're in Alberta. Yeah, Edmonton.
And we almost got divorced, like 3 months after we got married. But everything was fine until we did the shingling. And then the shingling, that was it. It was like, okay, one of us has to get off the roof before they get pushed off. Thank you. So what I want to say, Michael, is if you're building it with your partner, you may want to practice these skills early on. Don't end up sending her on to some kind of cruise that's like, arrivederci, bye-bye. Like, I got to do this by myself.
My old boss used to say that hanging wallpaper was almost the end of his marriage.
Oh my gosh. I think if anybody wants to hang wallpaper in my house, I will have to kill them. So that would be the end of the relationship anyway.
I had to take wallpaper off every wall in my last place I lived in because there's a little old lady that lived there before me and a different paper on every wall. And it was a nightmare. So I will never hang wallpaper again.
No. I was going to say what you need to do, Michael, of course, we have no way of touch base after this, because this is kind of our last, well, it's our last session, but it would be so cool to see, you know, in however long it takes you to get your deck, like pictures of what this looks like. This is, put a picture, the before picture is a cruise ship and the after picture is like your deck with your pool, right? And that'd be really cool.
Sort of like a cruise ship.
Sort of like, but it's forever, right? You get to enjoy that all the time. So, all right. Well, I think that we'll go. Heather and I, as in our run-throughs, I think we're going to get you guys out. Hopefully, I'm not even going to say that because the way that things have gone so far this morning, I'll just be lying. So, welcome to the last of our 3-part session on communication. And finally, today, we're going to be diving into the deep end, hence why we are kitted out in our goggles and swimming gear, because that's what we're doing. We're diving into the deep end. And hopefully you guys will dive on with us. So the previous session started us out on this journey of conversation by looking at some of the things that keep us from having good communication. So when we're armoring up, when we're carrying our 20-ton shield, when we're not listening, all of the things that we need to do to be able to prepare for a conversation and that doesn't happen. And so we sort of shoot ourselves in the foot before we even say the first word. So what we're finally going to try to do is figure out how to take all those skills that we've talked about in the past, roll them all into a nice package for you, and hopefully give you some opportunities to, in the future, experience interactions with people that are in your lives that are more transformational than transactional. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what that sounds like or what that means later on. Dr. Tim Baker, from whom we borrowed much of the content for what we talk about, says that relationships are basically built one conversation at a time. And that's very true. And Heather's going to have a great example of that later. So we need to be able to have good conversations. But first, of course, we have to get through all of the housekeeping details.
So I know that most of you have heard this before, but we're obligated to go through these. So the presentation that you're about to view is the intellectual property of the Department of Defense. Any reproduction or retransmission of the slides contained in this presentation is strictly forbidden.
Some of the topics that are going to be discussed, not necessarily in this webinar, may be of a sensitive nature. So just make sure that who's ever in the room is okay to hear it, and parental discretion is advised. And
as always, we really love participation. We love all this chat. Oh, that's okay. Thanks anyway, Cappy. We're happy to have you as much as we can have you. But everybody has stories that are their own. So we just ask that we respect that, and anything that is being discussed here in the chat stays here in this room. You are by no means obligated to participate in the chat, although we highly encourage that, because the more participation, the more everybody gets out of it. And just a reminder that this webinar is being recorded and it will be available for viewing later on CAF Connection. We're still trying to sort out those links. The YouTube channel hasn't been set up yet, but I know that some of you've got questions and I think I have the answers, but as I say, this morning's not been going well. So we do want to encourage as much participation as possible, but certainly if you want to limit that because of the recording aspect, you can certainly follow along without using any of the chat, video, or microphone options. Okay, and as always, we're going to ask how everybody is affiliated with the organization. So we'll just get you to let us know which area of D&D you belong to. Lots of serving members this morning. Nice. Okay. I'm glad to see family member. That's awesome. Yeah. Great. Thank you very much. That's just for our stats so that we sort of know who's joining us and if we're doing a good job of reaching out or not. All right. So as I alluded to on the title slide, the last two sessions we started looking at positions and how we sometimes choose the position as the hill that we're going to die on instead of letting ourselves dig a little bit deeper and go down below the surface of the water. And that's partly because of the fear that we have of exposing our vulnerabilities because of that 20-ton shield that we're hoisting around. Even though if we were to be a little bit more vulnerable with letting people know what's going on with us, it would probably have a much more positive impact on the communication that we're having. We looked at the importance of listening and how important it is to get to a place where we really want to hear what's going on with the other side of the conversation. But we have to do that first by letting go of our need to be heard, which is sort of counterintuitive, but we recognized and saw that the pleasure of being heard wants
or makes a person want to reciprocate that. And so once that sharing happens, that sharing of the pleasure happens, you're really able to have that conversation and kind of find out a little bit more about what's going on. Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head reminded us that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we need to listen twice as much as we talk. But part of the challenge of that has come from the fact that we've never really been taught how to be good listeners. So we learned 4 tips from a cute little video to remind us that we need to egg people on, to encourage them, that we want to ask for clarification so that we know that we're on the right track or on the same page, to not moralize, which is hard for us because we are very judgmental people by nature, some of us more so than others, and to make sure that we separate disagreement from criticism, because I can absolutely still value my friendship with Heather and completely disagree with what she's saying. Those two are not connected, right? We need to be able to separate those. And fortunately, those are skills that we can all learn and get good at. So the thing that we sent you off with was a handout that was hopefully going to give you some opportunities to do that, to ask some questions so that you could hone your listening chops a little bit. So we're hoping that you had a chance to maybe try some of those things out with your family and friends over the last week.
So if you remember, if you were here last week, we gave you the conversation starters last week to work with. Whether you were here last week or whether you used the homework from last week, we're hoping that maybe you did engage in some interesting, fun conversations that turned into you finding out a lot more about somebody and what was going on with them. So just an example from my own life, I've been working out at home through my own personal training gym, and I have this circuit training program that I do on one of my days, and I always lose track of how many rounds of my circuit I have done. So I actually paint in my spare time for as art. So I had these all my little kindness rocks that are, they're nice because they're sort of inspirational, and they get like, oh, be kind, oh, you can move mountains, right? So I was using those to count off my rounds, which I thought was kind of a fun way to do that. So I was telling Carissa about that, and out of that conversation, it sort of ended up me telling her that since I've been home, I'm really struggling with doing self-care because this whole learning curve has ended up creating a situation where I'm working a lot more hours than I actually was when we were in the workplace. So it's been really challenging to sort of find that balance. So it really turned into an interesting conversation about self-care and taking care of me, and how important that is, and my connection to art. And out of that actually also came a conversation that we would like to translate into something we do with you folks when we get back to doing other things, and maybe bringing art into some of our things that we do. So it's just very interesting how you can have one little simple topic about rocks turn into a really interesting conversation that can take you somewhere. So did anybody have any of those that they tried out this week? Maybe they tried one from the menu that we made, or maybe they had an interesting conversation that they found out a whole lot more about somebody that is around them, that kind of took a nice organic turn for them. That's a little bit of a tough one to share. I think it's probably a little bit intimidating to share that on a chat.
And long to type, but that's okay. Right, so we have another poll. This one is asking you how good you are at conversation. Last week we asked you if you thought you were a good listener, and here is the poll for how good you are at conversation. The first answer is inspired by the Donald, so hopefully you guys get the joke.
No one's fallen asleep.
That was actually Chris's answer. I was surprised. Daphne and I thought that he would be in the...
Please don't make me speak.
Yeah. Okay. That's all right.
Pretty good. Okay.
Yeah. There's no comments. There's no comments, which is good. That would be my dad. Well, I don't know. Okay. Awesome. So what we want to kind of take away from that is, how good are we at conversation? Is it a lost art form? Is it something that we, have lost the ability to do well? Or again, is it something that we've just not had an opportunity to practice and learn and get skilled at? Some people have described conversation as an art. And when you look at, well, back in the olden days, which means, 8 weeks ago, when you could go on public transit, when you could go to a restaurant, when you were sitting in a coffee shop or a pub, when you looked around, there were people having conversation, but just as often you would see people at a table together not speaking because they were, heads down in their devices. So in situations where you would think that there would be all these opportunities to converse, we're not doing it as much as we should, or maybe as much as we used to. So the question is, is it an art? But when you think about a day-to-day interaction, we all to some extent talk every day, whether it's with the person that you're co-isolating with or teleworking with or whatever the case may be. And for the most part, we're pretty decent at it, right? Like, so we've got pretty good. No one's fallen asleep on me yet, so that's good. I'm sure that there are people who wish that I would fall asleep and stop talking, but we have the ability to do the day-to-day small talk and chatter at work. But we want to, those are probably a little bit more like the aquafit level of a class, right? Like we're talking not a lot of challenge. You're in the shallow end, your feet are touching the ground, maybe you still have your floaties. It's not requiring a lot of skill. You can kind of get by and have an interaction that way. But if what you want to do is try to have those tough conversations with your coworkers, your boss, your family, that's going to take skills that are more in line with climbing up that 10-meter tower and jumping off. And you're going to require different skills to be able to do that if what you want, in fact, is to do a little bit of that investigation and get a little bit below the surface of the water. Mm-hmm. So we're going to need to step up our game a bit. So what do we need to do?
It's really interesting. Elijah's got a great comment there, that he's never had an issue with that, but he practiced it as a young person. And I think that so many of us miss those opportunities, because I know as a teen, growing up in the 80s, my parents were very old school, blue collar, and you just didn't talk about things. We didn't talk about anything that wasn't sort of surface, right? So we never talked about any of those vulnerable conversations. I do now with my dad. He's in his 70s now, and we have a lot more of those conversations, but it took for him to have a stroke before he actually was able to show some of those emotions, because that sort of inhibition went away for him after his stroke. But up until then, that was such a hard skill. So I think it's so important that we are teaching our young people these skills early on, so that it just becomes natural to have those conversations. So thank you for sharing that, Elijah. So when we talk about preparation, we're talking about a few different pieces here. So the first thing we need to think about when we're deciding if we're going to have a conversation with somebody, what is going on with us? Is it the right time for me to have this conversation? Am I in the right frame of mind? So maybe there's a whole lot of 20-ton shield being held up right now. I've got my defenses up, and I'm not really ready to be vulnerable and show somebody that what is going on with me. So we need to acknowledge, even if not overtly admit, that we are feeling overwhelmed. Maybe we're feeling tired, anxious, annoyed, whatever it might be, that are sort of those things that could impact a healthy conversation and a satisfying outcome. So we have to put that on the table for ourselves. And either we say, okay, I can still have this conversation and admit that to the person that I'm having this conversation with, or I have to say to myself, maybe now is not the right time. So in choosing the right time, there's a few pieces to that. Are you in the right frame of mind? Yes. Okay. But also, what about the other person? Are they prepared to have this conversation? A lot of times we end up dropping a bomb on the people we're having an issue with, because we're having the issue, but we've never actually said it to them. So they don't even know that there's an issue there. And we just, boom, I want to have this conversation right now, right here. You've been stewing on it, thinking about all the things that are important to you about that situation, but we're not giving them the same consideration of saying, this is going on for me. I would like to have a conversation with you about it. However, I'd like to give you some time to think about it, think about how you feel about this situation, so that you don't feel sort of caught off guard. So that's what we call raising the issue. So we're not necessarily saying we're going to have the conversation right now, but we're letting the person know that we would like to have a conversation with them about it, and maybe ask them to choose a time that would be appropriate for them. Okay. And the last piece is, does the person have all the information? I'm probably guilty of this at times in my life where I withhold information about what I'm having conflict with. So I sort of use that knowledge that I'm holding back as a weapon that I can now drop as a bomb on them during that conversation. So we need to be as transparent as we can possibly be with that person so that they know what they're stepping into, and so that they can respond and be appropriate in the conversation without feeling like they're walking on eggshells. So we've talked a lot about trust and vulnerability. I love my little rubber ducky sitting on the edge of the deep end. You know, a lot of us just don't want to jump in. We would rather sit on the sidelines than ever jump in the water and experience what it's like to be vulnerable, because God forbid there's a shark in the water. But we miss out on a lot when we do that. So a few pieces come into making it so that we can have a trust and vulnerability type of setting in our conversations with people. One is to treat people fairly, or better yet, equitably, because fair isn't always appropriate. And many of us have probably said that to our parents at one time or another. That's not fair, but it might have been equitable. And we have to sort of be able to look at that. So I used the example yesterday of talking about Carissa, who's 5'2" and is quite a petite person. Oh, sorry, excuse me. And her husband is over 6 feet tall. So she bakes a beautiful chocolate cake, and they both have a piece, and his is a little bit bigger. Is that equitable? Probably, because he needs a little bit more fuel than she does. So it may not look fair because his piece is bigger, but it's equitable. So if that makes sense to people, we oftentimes think everybody has to be treated the same, but we're not the same. So we want to be treated with equitably in those situations. The other piece is to think about the other individual and cut them a little bit of slack. They also have a 20-ton shield that they are carrying around, and there's a lot of stuff going on, and they have their own story that we don't always know. In fact, most times we don't know. I think all of us withhold something from the world that's ours alone. And so we never truly know somebody's deep story. So we need to cut them a little bit of slack and maybe put ourselves in their shoes for the moment and recognize that there's things we don't understand. We need to be as transparent as we can possibly be clear about what we're trying to say, and be as honest as we can. And that is the hardest thing that we can do when we're having conversations, because it's really scary to show that side of ourselves. So we need to be authentic, and we need to drop that shield. We're not, we're going to watch a little clip from Brené Brown in a minute, and she had this great quote in the clip later on that we're not going to watch, and I wanted to read it to you guys. So many people are choosing to live disappointed rather than live joyful and risk being disappointed. Isn't that true? We are so afraid of being vulnerable that we would rather go through life sort of feeling just okay rather than feeling really joyful and putting ourselves out there and fearing heartbreak. Right. And I think a lot of us live like that. We can have this issue going on in our most significant relationship we have with somebody that goes on for years, because we're just so afraid of raising the issue of what might happen, that we might destroy something, that we'd rather sort of live in this meh kind of situation than possibly experience true joyful happiness. So this is the clip I'm going to watch. So I don't know if you can.
Yeah, I can do it.
Do this? Okay, good.
Then you're going to have to take over.
I just want to say we get a chance to meet. I just
want
to say we get a chance to meet a lot of people.
Where we need to be.
We're not going to watch the whole thing because it's 9 minutes.
It's 9 minutes.
We're just going to watch a little clip of it.
It's really good.
Conversations in life and break them open. What's on that list?
I think vulnerability is the big one because it is the center of everything. And for me, I just had this moment where I was at Fort Bragg doing work with Special Forces. And and vulnerability is just uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. That's all it is.
Wait, let me process that.
Yeah. So to be vulnerable is to feel uncertain, at risk, and emotionally exposed.
Okay.
Like someone can see your emotions and you can't control.
It's terrifying.
Yes, you can't control what they make of them. And then I asked these soldiers a simple question. Can you give me an example of courage, one example of courage that did not involve uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure? And there was just silence until one guy stood up and said, 3 tours, ma'am. There is no courage without vulnerability. And now I've asked that question to 10,000 people. And, and to the listeners today and to you and to anyone in this room right now, give me an example of being brave that didn't require you to wrestle with vulnerability. It just doesn't exist.
And, Brene Brown is with us. Her job is to change our lives. You also talk about...
sorry, I'm doing 2 things at the same time.
Yeah. So, Kathy, on our... oops. I think I just hit the wrong one. It's in there twice for some reason. Uh-oh. Okay, we may end up at the beginning. Sorry, guys.
That's okay.
So, Kathy, you wanted to see that one, that video. It's right here if you have time to jot it down. If you don't, please feel free to email one of us at the end. Yeah. Taking pictures always faster. So I just really love Brene Brown. She's actually a researcher that researches specifically things like bravery and courage. And it's very interesting because the concept of bravery and courage within a military environment is very different than when we're talking about bravery and courage in communication. And yet there's so many crossover links there. So I love the example that soldier was just able to get up and say, hey, we can't go out into the battlefield without being vulnerable and being open with the people that we're out there with, because you're putting yourself in such a difficult situation. Thank you, Elijah. Courage without fear is not courage. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. So if we can translate, or you can translate, those of you that are serving members, that courage that you're able to take into your work and take it into your relationships, what a powerful tool, right? So
we're talking about all the relationships, right? Like not just the ones with your significant other, your partner, your family, but we're even talking about with your coworkers, with your troops, with the soldiers that you work with, airmen, I was going to say seamen, but is it sea people? I don't know. Anyway, somebody fix me. Wow.
We work on an Army base. Can you tell?
Yeah. Yikes. Seamen. Okay. So just to be inclusive is what I was trying to do badly. But I think that a lot of people get stuck into that way of, well, this is how I've always been talked to. This is how I'm going to talk to my coworker. And it takes courage to say, no, you know what? I'm not. I'm going to give that guy the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to cut them some slack. Yes, I can give them a blast of shit and tell them that they're doing a crappy job. But then I'm going to turn around and say, okay, so what gives? Tell me what's going on, and have that heart to heart and allow them to see that you are open and willing to hear what's going on with them, because you still have to do your job. There's still accountability that's there, but you can open up and change the way that those interactions happen. And I think that that's where a lot of the courage comes from. So when we're at work and we're talking about culture change and those kinds of things, and people don't like hearing that, and we're not saying that the culture needs to be changed. We're just thinking maybe there's some things that we can do differently that will really help people to be better people, better soldiers, seamen, airmen, and that translates into everything that we do. So when we're talking about accountability, when we're talking about like what is your role in this, we all have a role. So one of the people that we also relied heavily on for the development of this presentation is Candace Bertotti. She's an adjunct lecturer of public policy at Harvard. As a master trainer with Vital Smarts Australia, New Zealand, and is a negotiator. So she knows a couple of things about crucial conversation. So when you're having a conversation that's going to be important, that is an important topic to you, chances are good that it's going to be hard. So Candace says that what you need to be sure of is that your opening, that first couple of 30 seconds-ish, is crafted in such a way that the person is going to want to listen to what you have to say. You have a little window where you can invite them in by providing them with some information and then allowing them to know that you're okay with whatever their response is going to be, because you're trying to get below the surface of the water, right? Like you're trying to understand. With that example of you give the guy a blast of shit and then say, okay, so tell me what's going on. You know, we don't want them to get stuck on that position that they're defending. We want it to be open. So she's got some tips for getting there. And the first one is to start with the facts as you know them, because the facts that you have are always only as you know them, right? Until you are disproven on some level. Share with the person why those facts are a concern. And this is the key. Then follow with the question that invites the other person into dialogue. And that is huge, right? So you're putting some stuff out there and then you're presenting them with an opportunity to respond because they want to. It's an invitation that they want to accept. You have to be really remembering that what your goal is. You have to be clear with what your goal is, and that is to encourage someone to share their view. It is not to compel or convince at this point. Your goal is to find out more about what's going on. Because when you share your view or you allow them to share their view, you get what Candace calls a shared pool of meaning. And when you're in that shared pool of meaning, guess where you're at? You're getting closer to that common interest. You're getting to a place where you now can move forward from. You're able to draw your own conclusions based on the information that they have given you, and they can draw their conclusions based on the information that you have given them. When you're presenting that 30-second opening, you need to be confident in your approach, saying, you know what, this is really important. I really need to have this chance to talk to you, blah, 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 here's why. But you also need to be humble, because you don't have all the answers. You are not the problem solver. You need to be genuinely curious as to what their view is, and you need to be able to really share that with them, share that curiosity, really convince them that you really want to know what's happening. So you're going to be both confident and humble, and that means that what you're going to get is likely that opportunity to, again, have that dialogue. The last piece, and this is something that she's not said specifically, but we know from what we do and in Intercom and the different communications pieces, is the language that you choose to use. We have a tendency to, when we're in my position and you're in your position, we're looking to defend that. And when we're defensive, we're looking kind of like this, right? Sort of, all of this is about you. But then we got these three little guys pointing over here at me, which brings us back to the whole notion of accountability. So one of the things that we want to do is not make people feel defensive. They're already in a defensive stance, potentially. We don't want to make them feel more defensive. So the word that we want to avoid at all costs is you. And it's really a lot harder than you think it is, because we have this tendency to look at things from solely our perspective. And so it's like I, me, you. And that gets people's backs up. So we want to try to avoid that. So slipping back into our example from before, if I say, why did you spend so much money on groceries? It's going to get me a completely different response than if I say, I'm really stressed out at how much money was spent on groceries today. Can we talk about this? So one points the finger, the other speaks to how it impacted them personally, and there's a question that invites conversation. So
and
that's how we.
Challenging to do this. Like it's very difficult because we're so accustomed to saying you that we have to think about it a lot in order to find a way to word it in a way that is going to put them in an inviting place. But I think that there's a positive to that. A lot of people will say, well, it feels a little bit construed, but it slows us down. It slows us down and it makes us think about what we're going to say. And that slowness is actually a really positive thing when we're trying to get to the root of a problem. So how do we survive swimming in the deep end? Well, First of all, it is not about problem solving, and we've already talked about this. So we don't want to put on our fix-it hats right now. We want to just let the other person be heard. In fact, most people will tell you when that somebody offers them advice or a solution to what's going on, all they feel is invalidated and that their concerns aren't being taken seriously. So we really want to try to take off that fix-it hat and really try to just understand the other person. If you ever have been to a therapist or know anything about when people go to therapy, what you'll know is that therapists don't give us the answers. Now, they probably do have ideas running around in their head about how this might be better for them, but they are not about to offer that up. What they do is they help us to have that conversation so that we find out for ourselves. And that's what we want to do for other people, is we really want to allow them to speak, and oftentimes out of allowing them to speak, they're finding their own answers. We want to use those open-ended questions, and I know that, again, that's very challenging to think about how can I word this in a way that invites conversation. But when we ask those closed-ended questions that are easily answered with a yes or a no, it's going to feel more like an inquisition than a conversation. So we really want to try to ask those inviting questions. Okay, thank you.
Good. Yeah, that's awesome.
I
Giving
like
them
that.
the option. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's good. Because,
Yeah.
you know, sometimes if it's, you know, a burnt out light bulb, I want my husband to just fix it.
Yeah, or a spider or a heavy
Yes,
thing.
so those are positives for sure.
Yeah.
So remembering not to have your questions sound judgmental either, because we can ask a question that's open, but it also still sounds really judgmental. So watch your tone, watch the way in which you're saying it so that it's an invitation and not an accusation. Okay. Think slowly, okay, but think quickly. Oh, interesting. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I like that. And then the last thing we wanted to kind of go through with you comes back to Candace Bertodi. She uses the idea that we want to be concise. So we're thinking again back to our last webinar that we did last week when we were talking about our Mr. Potato Heads and talking, listening more than we talk. This is kind of pulling from that piece. When we're asking questions and when we're doing those invitations to have conversations, we want to keep it short and we want to keep it concise so that they don't feel we've taken over the conversation. So be concise, keep it to about 30 seconds. So what Candace suggests is 1 or 2 statements of fact about the situation, okay, as you know them. Again, we're only speaking from how we are viewing that. 1 sentence of the story, okay, and 1 question. So if we go back to the example that Carissa used last week about the grocery shopping and going over budget, it might sound something like this in asking that question. I thought we understood that we were following a budget and that we needed to stick to the grocery list when we went to the store. I see from the receipt that we are way over. So those are 2 statements of fact as we know them, okay? What is your understanding of how we are making sure we are going to stick to the budget? So we're asking that question in a way that's going to invite conversation and we haven't done any accusing, okay? So
And what we could have actually done is we could have stuck in a sentence on the impact, right? So the first 2 statement questions, and then there could have been a statement along the lines of, like that I had used before. It really stresses me out when we spend so much money, right? And then what is your understanding? And yes, the word your is in there, but we're asking about their understanding. So we're not saying you like it's semantics, but there's a difference between your understanding, which I'm asking, as opposed to you blew it again, right? So that's where we're trying to.
If you think about the you in the statement and read your, think about what you're saying it, and does the you feel like it's a finger pointing? Yeah. And if it does, then you need to remove it. Okay?
Yeah. So the last piece of that, and it all comes down to expectations, right? And we know what happens with expectations. A lot of the times they're unmet, and then we leave disappointed, or we feel like, you see, I knew it wasn't going to work, or whatever. So we need to manage those expectations. And it works both ways. And I was thinking about this, and it was keeping me up last night because I was like, I need to change that slide, but I had already sent it to Orsolia and I didn't want to send her yet another version. So what I want you to think about is when we're looking at these statements, what are our expectations? What do both of us expect out of this conversation? We need to have come to some kind of, not conclusion, but agreement. We need to be in some kind of an agreement as to what it is that we want to get out of this conversation. We both feel that there's something that's worth diving into and finding out a little bit more about. Have I communicated in my opening statement clearly what it is that I need to talk about? And similarly, have they had the opportunity to, yeah, that everyone has, exactly, yeah, you got it, Michael, for sure. Are we clear? Are we allowing both of us in this dialogue to get clarification when needed? And if it's not clear, then I need to make sure that I either figure out a different way. So talk slowly and think quickly. So I need to be thinking on the spot, or I need to say, you know what, I kind of need to, I thought that I was ready, but my ducks aren't in a row. So I need to come back and gather my thoughts and let's carry on with this later, right? So we need to, that communication and clarity needs to be there. Do we understand the implications of those expectations? Do we know what's going to happen? Are we then going to be able to accept and commit to them, right? So those three pieces, understanding, acceptance, and commitment, they all go together. If I'm having a conversation with my daughter about screen time, she understands how much I hate screen time. Like, I understand the importance of it for school, but all the extra YouTube and TikTok and Spotify nonsense drives me to distraction. She understands that. But does she accept that there has to be some kind of change on her part because she knows it's not good for her, right? She said so. But can she then commit to it? So in having that dialogue, all those pieces are going to fall into place, and you're going to feel when that's not happening, when you're feeling that resistance, that pushback, that like, yeah, okay, mom, fine, I won't watch YouTube anymore. That's not the same as understanding, accepting, and committing, right? That means maybe we need to, she's going to be like, oh God, we have to talk more about this. Sometimes you do, right? Sometimes you do. And sometimes you need to walk away and come back. But that's what we're talking about in terms of those expectations. So they all kind of go together. Both of us have them. We need to be on the same page with everything. And that's not the same thing as agreeing. It just means that you're dealing with and talking about the same situation, apples to apples, right? Because if I'm talking screen time and she's talking solely Minecraft, well, that's not the same thing. I'm talking the whole enchilada, right? So that's where the expectations come in. The kind of final piece that we want to really hit home is in all of this, because it's deep and it's heavy and you have to think and you need to use your words and you have to be careful. And we're not talking about sugarcoating, beating around the bush, not laying it out the way that it is. We're not saying any of those things. We don't want people to feel that they have to walk on eggshells. We just want people to be kind in their statements and in their words. If there's a problem, it needs to be addressed. It needs to be resolved, right? But in that, we need to be genuinely appreciative and curious about what's going on with them. And that genuine appreciation is something that's a little bit hard for us to accept sometimes. When they do a survey at work and people ask employees, like, how satisfied are you with the level of appreciation that you get? A lot of times people say, oh, well, we don't get any. But it's kind of like getting a compliment. You know, sometimes we do get appreciation, but maybe it doesn't feel as sincere or as genuine, but it's there. And so if someone says, hey, you know, I really like your hair today, you're like, oh, well, you know, it's just flat from the rain, as opposed to saying, you know, thank you very much, right? It's the same kind of thing with appreciation. Sometimes we get it and we're not necessarily recognizing it as such because it wasn't maybe the way that we would have given it. So we need to be, again, cutting people some slack. Some people aren't good at saying thank you, but you know what? That's the easiest way. So the easiest way to be appreciative is to say thank you for things that we might not necessarily have said thank you for before, that we've just taken for granted, because that's the other piece of communication that sometimes there's this bitterness and resentment, is because we feel like we've been taken for granted. So, you know, remember that We all need that appreciation. We miss it when we don't get it. So we just need to get good at saying thank you more often, being genuine about it, and doing it more than we maybe think is needed, because you can't really say thank you too many times. You know what I mean? Her other tips, Candace Bertotti's other tips on how to have authentic conversation is be genuinely curious, not I want to get as much information on you as possible because I can use that to my advantage later. That's not what we're talking about in terms of curiosity, right? We're talking about genuinely curious about what is happening right now and how we can fix this or move forward or use it to grow with or whatever. Really want to know the answer. Because what you're trying to do is connect with that person, right? Whether it's the person that you just gave a blast of shit to, you still need to connect with them. You still need to find out, what can I do to help you to reach your potential? And in order to do that, you need to have connection. Because what we want are interactions that are not transactional, right? Not like, do you want fries with that? Yes, please. Here you go. Have a nice day, right? That's a transactional interaction. We want something that's transformational. We want that person to know that you care enough that you gave them that blast of shit because you do have their best interest at heart. And that's going to transform the relationship that you have with them, because now they know that they can come to you if they've got questions or challenges or whatever, right? So that's what we're trying to strive for, is that connection, so that we can have those transformational types of interactions with people.
So, so the whole point or the purpose of conversation is to either change the future or to build a future with somebody. That's really the whole goal of any conversation. If you look at any conversation you've ever had, there was something there that we wanted to either move forward, end, or change. So think about the people that you're now friends with. Maybe you met them at work, and on the first day you started a conversation with them and you like that person and now you've become friends. That does not always happen. Maybe you met them and you didn't like them so much and you've become people that have to work together and find a way to work together efficiently. But either way, it's a relationship that you have built of some kind. Maybe it is the cute person that you met at the coffee shop and now they're your spouse. Maybe it's the person that you met at the dog park that's now your best friend. Those all started with a conversation. You didn't just walk up to that person and say, hey, be my best friend. Although little children tend to do that, we don't tend to do that as grown-ups, and it probably wouldn't go over very well if we did. I think you'd have people probably running very quickly from you if you were running around telling everyone, I like your hair, I want to be your best friend, right? But that's the idea, is that every conversation we have is taking us somewhere. But these three sayings here, learn from the past, live in the present, plan for the future, they're so key in having quality conversations. If we are stuck in the past when we're communicating with somebody, we're not truly listening. We're not truly present. We're thinking about what happened before. And so we're not really listening. We want to take what we have had happen to us in the past, what's happened in that relationship in the past, and we want to learn from it. But if we keep bringing it back into the relationship, then we are not truly present and able to move forward from there. On the other side of that, we don't want to be thinking about the future and what could potentially happen, because again, we are not truly listening. We're not truly present if we are now trying to figure out what's going to happen to us in the future in this relationship. So we really want to try to stay present with that person and really hear what they're saying. If we can get rid of all that mental noise that's going on of the past and the future and be present with that person, that communication is going to be so much more helpful and so much more satisfying to both parties.
So we've given you another handout as an option to download and to do, and we wanted it to look kind of like your old swimming report cards.
Oh, it didn't load.
It didn't load?
No, let me see if I can get it here. Sorry.
Okay. Heather's going to try to fix it.
Sorry, guys.
And if we can't get it to work, we have all of your emails, and we can have Orsolia send it to you guys. And then again, she'll just send it out as a group. And if you want it, great. If you don't, just delete it. That's always our backup go-to with this.
Okay.
Oh,
I did it.
Oh, look at that. Heather's on fire. So in this handout, what we're asking you to look at is a couple of conversations that you have over the next couple of weeks, right? Because all of this is about self-reflection, so introspection, and an opportunity to just sort of see what your role is in this, right? Because Alana's comment is very important, because the only person we have control over is ourselves. So the only thing that we can do is take a look at what our role was in the communication or the conversation or the interaction that we had with a person, right? So what we want you to kind of take a look at is not judge yourself, because that's a completely different thing. We just want to rate how you feel you did based on some of the things that we've been talking about over the last couple of sessions. You know, what went well? Did you use an opening in 30 seconds that led them to invited them into dialogue? Did you listen? Were you genuinely curious? Were you trying to share the pleasure of listening by being the one who listened first? You know, how did those things go? And now that we've talked a little bit more about what the words need to be, how to have those conversations, like hopefully you're feeling like you can put some of those pieces together. What words are you choosing? How are you thinking about the word you more? Are you trying to create a different way of speaking or engaging with people? And really what we want to do at the end of the day is really look at what our role is in this. I said to Heather, what I wanted to do was play, I'm a child of the 80s, and I wanted to play Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror as everybody was kind of coming into the room. But of course there's like SOCAN regulations, and so we can't just play music because it's licensed, and we don't have the ability to do that. But that song, I think, really speaks to the only thing in this world that we can do to make the world a better place, honestly, is change ourselves, our behavior, how we choose to do things, you know, whether that's buying organic or taking your bike to work or any of those sorts of things. With communication, same thing. It starts with the person who's looking back at you. We can't expect everybody else to just jump in and say, oh, well, this person's clearly taken a communication course, so now I have to alter how I'm interacting with them. That's unrealistic. That's an expectation that we need to manage, and that's that it's not realistic. So what role are you playing to try to create a dialogue? Because what we want is people to have dialogue. We don't want to have two people that are just taking turns talking, right? Because that's a completely different dynamic.
So,
sorry. So the resources. This week actually, and we did have a slide in it, but I took it out because it just didn't really seem to fit. This week was Mental Health Week, and I don't know how many of you have seen the notes that you've gotten maybe from CFMWS or the DND side of the house, but they had, it was hashtag Let's Get Real. And I think that really is so perfect with what we've been talking about today and the last couple of weeks. And the example that we had given was even something as simple as, when you see somebody at work walking down the street or whatever, maybe at work a little bit more realistic, what is our go-to greeting? It's, hey, how you doing? But do we want them to answer honestly? So maybe what we need to do is we need to get real. And if we don't have time to really hear what they have to say, maybe we just say, good morning, nice to see you. Hey, how's it going? Just, hey. Right? So if we want people to be real, then we have to start by being real. So we wanted to put a resource on the sheet, but it's too full. So check out the Let's Get Real resources that you hopefully have on your D1. And remember that we've got our CIFMAP number for folks who need maybe a little bit more support. The family information line, we got one family person on the line, and we were thinking about all the families who are, you know, having their partners deploy to Ontario and Quebec to help with the long-term care. So, I mean, that's scary in a whole nother way because it's a different danger that they're putting themselves in. So, you know, if people feel like they need support with that, there's that line to give them a little bit of assistance with. And we sometimes forget about our kids. You know, those of us who have kids, we've kept them inside for as long as we've probably had to keep them inside. It's not because it's a fun snow day, right? It's for a whole different reason. So remember to check in with them and see how they're doing. And if they're of the texting age and generation, that 686868 is a great way for them to start to learn that it's never too early and they're never too young to reach out for help.
So our takeaways for today, check your attitude. Before you decide to have that conversation, make sure that you're in the right frame of mind and you're able to respect what the other person is saying and be open to that conversation.
And establishing that trusting relationship is a bit like a chicken or the egg kind of scenario, because trust and authenticity are related. Authentic communication builds trust. So you need to kind of work on both of them simultaneously if what you're wanting to do is to get into that place of trust and vulnerability. We're really good at detecting disingenuous people, so be sure to be as authentic as you can.
So having said being authentic, we need to be real in what and how we say things to the other person and make sure that we're respecting that individual, but it also reveals enough about us that they're willing to have those conversations with us.
And remember to be appreciative. Thank you goes such a long way. Thanks for taking the time to listen to my concerns today. Thanks for helping me out at work. Thanks for going the extra mile. I know how busy you are, right? It doesn't take a lot. Just a little bit of one sentence can go the world of difference to helping them feel like they can maybe lower their shield a little bit.
And although it might seem like a good idea to sort of have a script written down, we want to be able to use our own words and have it happen organically. Although we would suggest sitting down and writing down your thoughts, we don't want you to bring a script to the conversation either. So it's always a good idea to sort of put it on paper. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What are my interests and needs? Because it helps to clarify those for us before we go into communication. But try to enter that communication with those listening ears and responding rather than using a script to see you through that conversation.
When you're being curious and you're asking questions that really invite them to share their perspective, that's what creating dialogue is all about. It's the ability to see things through their eyes and get into that shared pool of meaning, which allows you to move forward rather than being stuck in the past or in assumptions. It's what allows us to take things to the next kind of level.
Mm-hmm. And the last thing we would say is coming back to a little bit of last week, and it's going to sound like really bad math, but if both parties set out to listen 90% of the time and talk 10% of the time, it's going to be a very validating conversation and people are going to feel very heard. Now, I promise the math will work out in the end, but if you set out with that intention, you're setting out to intend to listen and understand the other person rather than being the one that's always holding the ground when it comes to the conversation. So we do have a couple of new polls that have come out from Ottawa. They are trying to find out if what we're doing is working, if there's any things that we can do to improve. So we're just going to ask you to fill in a couple of these things before we close for the day. So one being, I feel I can apply what I learned today in my daily living. And although you may not be taking away a whole bunch, maybe you know a lot of this stuff already. Maybe there's a little nugget of information that you're walking away with saying, yeah, that's true for me. Okay.
The poll is back. We've got lots of agrees and only one. So it says strongly agree, disagree, neither agree nor disagree.
That's my fault because I was under pressure typing.
I know. It's true. It's
because
totally my fault.
Carissa was not able to load anything, so I was furiously typing. So the bottom one should have said.
If anybody disagrees,
yes. Thankfully, you all agree.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
So Mike will not be happy with my results on this one.
We've skewed the answers.
Yeah, that's right. You have no choice but to like us here.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Oh dear. And the last one we have is just about this platform. So bearing in mind that we have some pieces that we really need to stick with when it comes to our platforms, being the Department of National Defense, we had to find a platform that was going to meet all security measures, and this is the one that they landed on. But if there's something about it that really disappoints you, then just let us know, and hopefully they can find something that's going to work better for us in the future if you're not liking it. We don't mind it, but we're only speaking from our side of the house.
And we apologize if you guys were really wanting to like be on camera and on microphone. And I don't know why we sort of unilaterally decided that we weren't going to let you do that. So if that's something that you would have really appreciated more, then by all means, because Heather and I are planning on doing some more in the future. So yeah, if you'd like to have more of that like screen time, then we can certainly, when we were only speaking for ourselves, we don't know what the other facilitators are doing necessarily, but yeah.
Okay, and that is it for us. So thank you for joining us today, everybody. Hopefully you'll watch out for Carissa and I in the future. We probably are going to take a different route and do some of our other core program areas when we move forward. I know Carissa is talking about doing a sleep and a stress for us in the future, but we don't know when those will get scheduled. So you just have to keep an eye out for our names. If you are wanting something to send to your CO, I know that's been a question that's been asked. What we can do is we can have you email us, and I will put in our chat our email addresses so that you can email us and we will send you off a confirmation to your CO if you like.
Yeah, we don't have official certificates because these, like when you take Intercom as an example, it's 2 days, there's like role plays, there's like, really kind of in-depth stuff. So it's a completely different experience than, what we were able to put together in a series like this. So the Mighty codes and the HRMS codes that we would be able to give normally when we're having regular classes and courses and workshops, they just don't apply in kind of this environment. But certainly we can absolutely, yeah, a certificate of participation, yes. That's, we can like super plain, like it's not going to be fancy. It's just going to be basically saying art of communication or whatever it was called. So and so participated. So we can definitely do that. It's my present.
Yeah, it's just not going to have the HRMS codes that we would normally be supplying when we're in a classroom.
Yeah. So
yeah, just email us, everybody, because that's where they're at. They're sort of still feeling out how they're going to proceed with that, but we are happy to send a confirmation to your CO. So email us and we can do that for you. Okay.
I'm writing Arun's down. Where did it just? Oh, it was there and then it was gone. Arun, you're so quick. I didn't catch it. Okay, thanks. Fitness with Arun at outlook.com. And Ilana, I have your email, so I can send that certificate confirmation to CO. Okay. So yeah, I can absolutely do that as well.
And if you want ones for the ones last week, feel free to just let us know that as well, because I know that that was a question that got asked last week and we weren't able to respond appropriately to it because we didn't really know what Ottawa's stance on that. So.
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll make it for like I'll make it so that it lists the 3 that were in the series.
Sure.
Yeah, does that work? Okay. Yeah, so that's what I'll do.
Wonderful.
So if there's anybody else who needs that, you've got the emails. Thank you so much for participating, everybody. You guys were super fun, and it was nice seeing the names. Yeah, I can send it to you directly because I have your email, Ilana, for sure. It was nice seeing the familiar names pop up, and hope that you guys stay safe, stay healthy, stay well, and we look forward to maybe seeing your names pop up on ones that we're doing in the future. So take care, enjoy the weather wherever you are. Good luck on the deck, Michael, and happy weekend.
Happy Mother's Day for those of you that are moms.
Oh yeah. Awesome. All right, everybody. Thanks, Ben. Ben from Petawawa. That's so cool.
All right. Okay. Good job, everybody. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Peace out. Bye, Heather.
Bye, friend. Hey, I don't know if we're having a meeting, are we?